The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Windsor Castle as Kate Middleton walked slowly through the rose garden. Her steps were measured, careful, as if she carried the weight of the entire kingdom on her shoulders. The past few months have been a whirlwind of emotions, medical appointments, and hushed conversations behind closed doors. Today would be different. Today, she would finally share the truth that had been burning inside her heart. Princess and stood near the fountain, her weathered hands clasping a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The Princess Royal had always been the rock of the family, the one who never showed vulnerability, never let emotions get the better of her. But lately, even it seemed different. The lines around her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and worried thoughts. Kate approached her sister-in-law with hesitation. The two women had shared many conversations over the years, but this one would be unlike any other. The weight of what Kate needed to say pressed down on her chest, making each breath feel heavy and deliberate. And Kate said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "Could we talk? Privately?" The older woman turned, and for a moment, Kate saw something she had never seen before in Princess Anne's eyes: fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from external threats, but the deep, gnawing fear that comes from sensing that life is about to change forever. They walked together to a secluded bench beneath an ancient oak tree. The same tree where Kate had once played with her children, where she had shared quiet moments with William, where she had found peace during the most challenging times of her royal duties. Now, it would witness perhaps the most difficult conversation of her life. Kate's hands trembled as she sat down. She had rehearsed these words 1,000 times in her mind, but now, facing and they seemed to evaporate like morning mist. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. "I need to tell you something," Kate began, her voice catching slightly. "Something that will change everything for our family." Anne's face remained composed, but Kate could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the bench. The Princess Royal had spent her entire life preparing for difficult news, but nothing could have prepared her for what was coming. Kate closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength from somewhere deep inside herself. When she opened them again, she looked directly into Anne's eyes, knowing that once she spoke these words, there would be no taking them back. "The doctors—" Kate paused, her voice breaking slightly. "The doctors found something during my recent surgery. Something they didn't expect." The color drained from Anne's face, but she remained silent, waiting for Kate to continue. In that moment, the strong, unflappable Princess Royal looked suddenly vulnerable, suddenly human in a way that Kate had never seen before. Kate reached out and took Anne's hand in hers. The older woman's skin was cold, despite the warmth of the morning sun. "They found cancer, Anne. It's serious, but they caught it early. I'm going to start treatment next week." The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Kate watched as and processed what she had just heard, saw the exact moment when the reality of it hit her. The Princess Royal's composure, built up over decades of royal training and personal strength, began to crack. "How long have you known?" Anne asked, her voice barely audible. 3 weeks, Kate replied honestly. "I needed time to process it myself before I could tell anyone else. William knows, of course, and the children were still figuring out how to tell them." Anne's eyes filled with tears, something Kate had never seen before. The woman who had faced down charging horses, who had survived a kidnapping attempt, who had weathered every storm the royal family had faced, was crying. Not the polite tears of a royal at a state funeral, but real, raw tears of a woman who had just learned that someone she loved was facing the fight of her life. "I'm scared," and Kate whispered, and in those 3 words, she revealed more vulnerability than she had shown to anyone, even William. "I'm scared for myself, for William, for the children. I'm scared about what this means for the monarchy, for our future," and squeezed Kate's hand tighter. "Tell me what you need," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Whatever it is, whatever you need, I'll make it happen." Kate felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had expected support but the fierce determination in the older woman's voice surprised her. This wasn't just royal duty speaking. This was family. "I need you to help me be strong," Kate said. "I need you to help me show the children that everything will be okay, even when I don't feel okay myself. I need you to help William carry the weight of this, because I know he's going to try to carry it all alone," and nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Of course. You have my word." They sat in silence for several minutes, both women processing the magnitude of what had just been shared. Kate felt a strange sense of relief. For 3 weeks, she had carried this burden alone, even with William's support. Sharing it with and felt like finally allowing herself to breathe again. "Does the king know?" and asked eventually. Kate shook her head. "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. I knew you would understand what this means, not just for me, but for all of us," and understood exactly what Kate meant. The Princess of Wales wasn't just a wife and mother facing a cancer diagnosis. She was a key member of the royal family, someone the public looked up to, someone whose health and well-being affected the stability of the monarchy itself. "We'll tell him together," and said firmly, "and we'll figure out how to handle everything else together too. The public statements, the official duties, the children's schedules, all of it." Kate nodded gratefully. She had been dreading the logistics almost as much as the treatment itself. How do you tell the world that the future Queen of England has cancer? How do you maintain royal duties while fighting for your life? How do you protect your children from the media frenzy that was sure to follow? "I keep thinking about the children," Kate said, her voice breaking again. "George is old enough to understand what cancer means. Charlotte will have questions I don't know how to answer. And Louis, he's still so young." Anne's expression softened. "Children are stronger than we give them credit for," she said gently. "And they have the best parents they could ask for. They'll get through this because you and William will make sure they do." Kate wanted to believe that, but the fear for her children's well-being threatened to overwhelm her. She had always been fiercely protective of them, working hard to give them as normal a childhood as possible despite their royal status. Now, their mother's illness would thrust them even further into the public eye. "The media will be relentless," Kate said, voicing one of her biggest concerns. "Every medical appointment, every treatment, every moment of weakness will be scrutinized and analyzed." Anne's jaw tightened. "Let them try," she said with a steel in her voice that reminded Kate why the Princess Royal was so respected. "We'll control the narrative. We'll decide what information gets shared and when, and anyone who crosses the line will have to deal with me personally." For the first time since her diagnosis, Kate smiled genuinely. The thought of Princess and taking on overzealous journalists was both amusing and comforting. If anyone could protect her family from media intrusion, it would be Anne. "There's something else," Kate said, her voice dropping even lower. "The doctors want me to consider stepping back from most of my royal duties during treatment, at least for the first few months." This was perhaps the hardest part for Kate to accept. Her royal duties weren't just obligations. They were her passion. She loved meeting with charities, supporting causes close to her heart, representing the royal family at events around the world. The thought of stepping away from all of that felt like losing a part of herself, and was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. "The monarchy has survived much worse than this," she said finally. "We'll redistribute your duties among the rest of us. The important thing is that you focus on getting better." Kate felt tears welling up in her eyes again. "I feel like I'm letting everyone down. The charities I support, the people who depend on me, the family." "Stop," and said firmly, turning to face Kate fully. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not letting anyone down. You are dealing with a serious illness with more grace and strength than anyone could expect. The people who matter, your family, your friends, the people who truly care about you, they want you to focus on getting better. Everything else can wait." Kate nodded, but the guilt still gnawed at her. She had spent over a decade building her role within the royal family, developing relationships with charities, establishing herself as a working member of the monarchy. Stepping away from all of that, even temporarily, felt like abandoning her responsibilities. "I've been thinking about making a video," Kate said, "to announce the diagnosis publicly. I want people to hear it from me, in my own words, rather than through official statements or media speculation. And consider this. That's a brave choice. It will give you control over the message, but it will also make you incredibly vulnerable." "I think people deserve honesty," Kate replied. "I've always tried to be genuine in my public role. This is just a different kind of genuineness." They discussed the practicalities of such an announcement. When to film it, what to say, how to balance honesty with privacy. Anne's experience in dealing with media crises proved invaluable as they worked through the details. As they talked, Kate felt some of the weight lifting from her shoulders. Having Anne's support, her practical advice, and her fierce protectiveness made the future seem less daunting. She wasn't facing this alone. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and they could hear the sounds of the castle coming to life around them. Soon, they would need to return to their regular duties, to maintain the appearance of normalcy, while everything had fundamentally changed. "There's one more thing," Kate said as they prepared to leave their secluded spot. "I need you to promise me something," and looked at her expectantly. "If something happens to me," Kate began, and immediately shook her head. "Nothing is going to happen to you," and said firmly. "Please," Kate insisted. "I need to know that if something does happen, you'll help William and the children. I need to know they won't be alone." Anne's expression grew even more serious. "Kate, you have my solemn promise. If anything happens to you, which it won't, but if it does, I will be there for your family. Always." Kate felt a profound sense of relief at those words. Whatever happened in the coming months, whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that her children would have Anne's protection and support. As they walked back toward the castle, Kate reflected on how much her life had changed in the space of a few weeks. Just a month ago, her biggest concerns had been planning George's upcoming school events and preparing for a series of royal engagements. Now, she was facing a battle that would test every aspect of her strength and resilience. But she wasn't facing it alone. She had William's unwavering love and support. She had her children giving her reason to fight, and now she had Anne's fierce loyalty and protection. It wasn't enough to take away the fear, but it was enough to give her hope. The diagnosis had changed everything, but it had also revealed the depths of love and support that surrounded her. In the darkest moment of her life, Kate was discovering lights she hadn't even known existed. Princess, and the woman known for her stoic demeanor and no-nonsense attitude, had shown her a tenderness and vulnerability that made Kate feel less alone in her fight. As they approached the castle doors, Kate took one last look at the garden where she had shared her secret. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of telling others. The king, the queen, the rest of the family. Soon after that, the world would know. But for now, in this moment, she felt stronger than she had in weeks, ready to face whatever came next with the knowledge that she had an army of people who loved her standing behind her. The future was uncertain. The road ahead would be difficult, but Kate Middleton was ready to fight. And with Princess and by her side, she knew she had one of the strongest allies she could ask for. The week following Kate's revelation to Princess, and moved with the strange quality of a dream, where everything appears normal on the surface, while underneath, seismic shifts reshape the very foundation of reality. Kate went through the motions of her daily routine: breakfast with the children, reviewing correspondence, attending small meetings. But everything felt different now that Anne shared her secret. Princess, and had kept her word completely. Not once did she betray the knowledge she carried, even when the family gathered for their weekly Sunday lunch at Windsor. Kate watched in amazement as Anne maintained perfect composure while discussing upcoming royal engagements, never once hinting that half of those plans would soon need to be canceled or redistributed. But Kate could see the subtle changes in Anne's behavior. The way she lingered a moment longer when saying goodbye. The way her eyes would find Kate across a room during family gatherings, offering silent support. The way she had quietly rearranged her own schedule to be more available, though she presented these changes as coincidental. It was Tuesday evening when Kate finally worked up the courage to tell King Charles. She had arranged to visit him alone, something that wouldn't raise suspicions since she often consulted with him about her charitable work. As she walked through the familiar corridors of Clarence House, Kate's heart hammered against her ribs. The king was in his study, surrounded by red dispatch boxes and official papers. When she entered, he looked up with the warm smile he reserved for family members. "Catherine, my dear, how lovely to see you. Please sit down. Would you like some tea?" Kate shook her head, unable to trust her voice just yet. Charles noticed her unusual quietness immediately. Over the years, he had grown to appreciate Kate's steady presence and thoughtful insights. She wasn't someone given to drama or unnecessary worry, so her obvious distress immediately put him on alert. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently, setting aside his papers and giving her his full attention. Kate took a deep breath, drawing on the strength she had found in her conversation with Anne. "Your Majesty," she began formally, then corrected herself. "Charles, I need to share something with you that will affect the entire family." The king's expression grew serious. As a man who had spent his entire life preparing for the responsibilities of the crown, he recognized the tone of someone about to deliver news that would require difficult decisions. Kate told him everything: the surgery, the unexpected discovery, the diagnosis, the treatment plan that would begin the following week. She watched as the man who would be crowned within the year processed the reality that one of his key family members, someone the public adored and relied upon, was facing a battle that could change everything. Unlike Anne's emotional response, Charles remained outwardly calm, but Kate could see the impact in the way his hands stilled, the way his breathing became more measured. This was the king receiving information that would affect not just his family, but the institution he was about to lead. "Have you consulted with the best specialists?" he asked immediately. "I can arrange for you to see anyone, anywhere in the world. Cost is no object, protocol is no object." Kate felt a wave of gratitude for his immediate focus on her well-being rather than the institutional implications. "The doctors are excellent. We've explored all options, and I'm confident in the treatment plan." Charles nodded, then asked the question Kate had been dreading. "What does this mean for your royal duties?" "I'll need to step back from most public engagements for several months," Kate said quietly. "The treatment schedule is intensive, and the doctors want me to avoid crowds and public spaces where I might be exposed to infections." The king was quiet for a long moment, processing the logistical challenges this would create. Kate was one of the most popular members of the royal family, someone whose presence at events often made the difference between success and mere obligation. Her charitable work had become a cornerstone of the modern monarchy's public image. "We'll manage," Charles said finally, and the simple certainty in his voice reminded Kate why he was suited for the crown. "The family will rally round. We always do." But Kate could see him mentally rearranging the complex chessboard of royal responsibilities, and would need to take on additional duties. William's schedule would become even more demanding as he covered for both his wife and supported her through treatment. The entire delicate balance of the modern monarchy would need to be recalibrated. "I want to make a public announcement," Kate told him. "A video message, speaking directly to the public. I think they deserve honesty about what's happening." Charles considered this carefully. In decades past, royal health issues were kept strictly private, discussed only in the most general terms, if at all. But the modern monarchy required a different approach, especially for someone as beloved as Kate. "That's a brave decision," he said, "and I think it's the right one. People will respect your honesty and courage." They spent the next hour discussing practicalities: how to time the announcement to minimize media frenzy, which charities Kate was most concerned about disappointing, and how to ensure continuity of support, how to protect the children from excessive attention while being open about Kate's condition. "There's something else we need to discuss," Charles said eventually, his tone becoming more formal. "The succession planning." Kate felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what he was referring to, but hearing it stated so directly made her mortality feel suddenly, starkly real. "If something were to happen to you," Charles continued gently. We need to ensure that William and the children are protected and supported. Not just financially, that's already secure, but emotionally and practically. Kate nodded, though her throat felt tight. I've spoken to Anne about that. She's promised to be there for them and is excellent in a crisis, Charles agreed. But we should also consider bringing in additional support. Child psychologists, grief counselors if needed. We want to ensure the children have every resource available. The conversation was necessary, but devastating. Planning for the possibility of her death, while she was still healthy enough to have these discussions, felt surreal and horrible. But Kate knew Charles was right to think ahead. The royal family couldn't afford to be unprepared for any eventuality. I'm going to beat this, Kate said firmly, as much to convince herself as to reassure Charles. I believe you will, he replied, and the conviction in his voice helped steady her. You have every advantage: excellent medical care, a strong support system, and the prayers of millions of people who love you. As Kate prepared to leave, Charles stood and embraced her, something he rarely did outside of formal greeting protocols. You are so much more than just the Princess of Wales, he said softly. You are a beloved daughter-in-law, a wonderful mother, and a dear friend. Whatever happens, we will face it together as a family. Kate felt tears threatening again. The unconditional support from both and Charles had given her something she hadn't expected, a sense that she could be vulnerable and still be valued. For so long, she had felt that her worth to the royal family depended on her ability to perform her duties flawlessly. Learning that she was loved simply for who she was, regardless of her ability to fulfill royal obligations, was a gift she hadn't known she needed. The next morning brought the challenge Kate had been dreading most, telling her children. She and William had agreed to tell them together, in their own home at Kensington Palace, where the children felt safest and most secure. They gathered in the family sitting room after breakfast, the same room where they had celebrated birthdays, played games, and shared countless ordinary family moments. Kate looked at her three children, George serious and thoughtful at 10, Charlotte bright and curious at 8, Louis still innocent and playful at 5, and felt her heart break a little at what she was about to take from them. We need to talk to you about something important, William began, his voice steady but gentle. Mummy has been to see the doctors, and they found something that means she needs special medicine to get better. George's face immediately grew worried. At 10, he had heard enough about cancer through various charity work to understand that it was serious. Charlotte looked between her parents, sensing the gravity of the situation even if she didn't fully understand it. Louis continued playing with his toy cars, only half listening. The doctors found some bad cells in my body, Kate explained, using language they had carefully chosen to be honest, but age-appropriate. They need to give me strong medicine to fight these bad cells, which means I might not feel very well for a while. Charlotte was the first to ask the question Kate had been dreading. Are you going to die? Kate felt William's hand find hers under the cushion between them. The doctors are very good at fighting these bad cells, she said carefully. The medicine they're going to give me works very well, and I'm going to do everything I can to get better. But I might be more tired than usual, and I might not be able to do some of the things we normally do together. George, always the protective older brother, asked immediately, what can we do to help? Kate's heart swelled with pride and love for her eldest child. You can help by being patient with me when I need to rest more. You can help by being extra good listeners for Daddy. And you can help by giving me lots of hugs, because hugs always make me feel better. Louis looked up from his cars. Will you still read bedtime stories? As often as I can, Kate promised, gathering him into her lap. And when I can't, Daddy will read extra stories. They spent the next hour answering questions, offering reassurances, and simply holding each other. Kate was amazed by her children's resilience and maturity. They were scared. She could see it in their eyes, but they were also determined to be brave for her. Charlotte, ever practical, asked about school. Do we have to tell our teachers? William nodded. We'll talk to your teachers so they understand if you feel sad or worried sometimes. And if you want to talk to someone about how you're feeling, we can arrange that too. George, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke up. Will people take pictures of you when you're sick? Kate felt a surge of anger at the reality her children had to live with, the constant awareness that their private moments might become public spectacles. We're going to ask people to give us privacy while I'm getting better, she said. But if you see photographers or reporters, remember what we've always taught you. Don't talk to them, stay close to your protection officers, and know that we're working hard to keep your lives as normal as possible. The conversation was heartbreaking, but also healing in its own way. Kate felt closer to her children than she had in years. Their questions were thoughtful and genuine. Their concerns were about her well-being rather than the disruption to their routines, and their immediate offers of help and support reminded her why fighting this disease was so important. That afternoon, while the children were at school, Kate and William worked with the Palace Communications team to plan her public announcement. The decision to make a video message was unprecedented for a health disclosure of this nature, but it felt like the right approach for the situation and for Kate's personality. They decided to film the message in the garden at Windsor, in a spot that felt both natural and dignified. Kate would speak directly to the camera, explaining her diagnosis and treatment plan in her own words. The goal was to be honest about the seriousness of her condition while also expressing optimism about her recovery. Writing the script was emotionally exhausting. Every word had to be carefully chosen to balance truth with hope, to acknowledge the public's concern while maintaining appropriate privacy, to thank people for their support while asking for space. Kate went through dozens of drafts, each one feeling either too clinical or too emotional. I want people to understand that this is serious, but I also don't want to scare them unnecessarily, Kate told William as they worked on yet another version. I want to thank everyone who will support us, but I also need to ask for privacy for the children. William read through the latest draft. I think you found the right tone, he said. It's honest, it's grateful, and it's hopeful. That's exactly who you are. Kate felt a wave of love for her husband. Throughout this entire ordeal, he had been her rock, her advocate, and her closest supporter. She knew he was scared too, probably more scared than she was, but he never let that fear overshadow his determination to help her through this. Are you sure about doing this publicly? William asked one more time. We could handle this with just official statements. You don't have to put yourself through the emotional toll of speaking about this on camera. Kate considered this. Part of her wanted to hide, to deal with her illness privately and emerge only when she was healthy again. But she thought about all the people who had supported her over the years, who had invested emotionally in her story and her role in the royal family. They deserved honesty from her. I need to do this, she said finally. It feels important to speak for myself in my own words. I think people will appreciate the honesty, and it might help other people who are going through similar situations. The filming was scheduled for 2 days later. Kate spent those days preparing mentally and emotionally for what would be one of the most difficult public appearances of her life. She knew that once the video was released, everything would change. The secret that she had shared with only her closest family members would become public knowledge, subject to global discussion and speculation. Princess and visited the evening before the filming. She found Kate in the nursery, organizing toys and books, a nervous habit she had developed during stressful times. How are you feeling about tomorrow? And asked, sitting down on the small chair beside Kate. Terrified, Kate admitted, once this is public, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know. Everyone will have opinions about my medical decisions, my treatment plan, my ability to fulfill my royal duties. And was quiet for a moment, watching Kate fold tiny sweaters with unnecessary precision. Do you remember when I was nearly kidnapped? She asked suddenly. Kate looked up, surprised by the unexpected topic. Of course. You were incredibly brave. I didn't feel brave, and said. I felt terrified and angry and completely overwhelmed. But I did what I had to do because it was the right thing to do, not because I felt brave. Kate set down the sweater she had been folding. What's your point? My point is that bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing despite being scared. You're about to do something incredibly brave tomorrow. Not because you're not afraid, but because you're doing it anyway. Kate felt tears welling up in her eyes. What if I can't get through it? What if I break down on camera? And reached over and took Kate's hands in hers. Then you break down on camera, and people will see that you're human. That might be exactly what they need to see. The night before the filming, Kate couldn't sleep. She kept going over her words, practicing her delivery, imagining all the ways it could go wrong. William held her close, neither of them speaking, both of them aware that tomorrow would mark the beginning of a very different chapter in their lives. But as Kate finally drifted off to sleep, she felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of relief. Tomorrow would be hard, but it would also mark the end of carrying this secret alone. Soon, she would have the support and prayers of millions of people who cared about her. The road ahead would be difficult, but she wouldn't be walking it alone. The morning of the filming dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself was offering encouragement for one of the most difficult days of Kate's life. She woke before dawn, unable to sleep any longer, and found herself standing at the window of their bedroom at Kensington Palace, watching the world wake up around her. In a few hours, everything would change. The private battle she had been fighting would become public knowledge, shared with millions of people around the world. William stirred behind her, immediately sensing her absence from bed. He joined her at the window, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, both understanding the magnitude of what lay ahead. I keep thinking about all the people who will see this video, Kate said finally. Families dealing with cancer, children who look up to me, elderly people who have followed my story since our engagement. I feel responsible for giving them hope, but what if I can't deliver on that promise? William turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You don't have to deliver on any promises except to yourself and your family, he said firmly. You don't owe anyone a particular kind of recovery or a specific outcome. You just owe them honesty, and you've already given them that. Kate nodded, but the weight of public expectations still pressed down on her. She had spent over a decade carefully crafting her public image, always appearing composed, always meeting expectations. The idea of showing vulnerability on such a massive scale felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. The makeup and hair team arrived early, along with the small camera crew that would film her announcement. Kate had insisted on keeping the production minimal, just a few trusted professionals who had worked with the royal family before. She wanted the message to feel personal and intimate, not like a formal royal statement. As she sat in a makeup chair, Kate found herself thinking about all the other significant moments in her life that had been captured on camera. Her wedding day, the births of her children, countless royal engagements, and state occasions. But none of those compared to this moment, where she would be sharing the most personal and frightening news of her life with the world. Princess Anne arrived just as Kate was finishing her preparations. She had promised to be there for support, and her presence immediately made Kate feel more grounded, and looked at Kate carefully, assessing not just her appearance, but her emotional state. You look beautiful, and said simply. More importantly, you look strong. Kate glanced at herself in the mirror one final time. She did look strong, she realized. The past few weeks of grappling with her diagnosis had changed something in her face. There was a new depth there, a maturity born of confronting mortality and choosing to fight. The filming location was a carefully chosen spot in the garden at Windsor Castle, beneath the same oak tree where Kate had first told her secret. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of them. This tree had witnessed Kate's most vulnerable moment, and now would witness her moment of greatest courage. As the camera crew set up their equipment, Kate walked through the garden with Anne, using the familiar surroundings to calm her nerves. They talked about everything except what was about to happen. The children's upcoming school events, Anne's recent charity engagements, the beautiful spring flowers beginning to bloom around them. But as the time for filming approached, Kate felt her anxiety spike. Her hands began to shake slightly, and she could feel her heart racing, and noticed immediately and guided Kate to sit on a bench just out of sight of the camera crew. "Talk to me," and said gently, "What's going through your mind right now?" Kate took a deep breath. "I keep thinking about my children watching this someday, when they're older. What will they think of their mother breaking down on camera? What will they think about me sharing such private information with the world?" And considered this carefully before responding. "I think they'll be proud of their mother for being brave enough to tell the truth. I think they'll understand that you did this not for attention or sympathy, but because you believe people deserved honesty from someone they had invested their trust in." Kate felt some of the tension leave her shoulders, and was right. Her children would understand that this decision came from a place of integrity, not weakness. "There's something else," Kate admitted. "I'm afraid that once people know I have cancer, that's all they'll see when they look at me. I don't want to become the princess with cancer. I want to still be Kate, still be the person who cares about early childhood development and photography and supporting young families. I don't want this diagnosis to define me." Anne's expression grew fierce. "Anyone who reduces you to just your illness doesn't deserve your concern. The people who matter, your family, your real friends, the people whose lives you've touched through your work, they see all of you. They always have, and they always will." Kate felt a wave of gratitude for Anne's unwavering support. Throughout this entire ordeal, the Princess Royal had been exactly what Kate needed. Strong when Kate felt weak, practical when Kate felt overwhelmed, and protective when Kate felt vulnerable. The director approached them gently, indicating that they were ready to begin filming. Kate's stomach dropped, but she stood up and walked toward the camera with more confidence than she felt, and squeezed her hand one final time before stepping back out of the shot. As Kate took her position in front of the camera, she looked directly into the lens and imagined she was talking to just one person, someone who cared about her and wanted to hear the truth from her own lips. The red recording light came on, and Kate began to speak. Her voice was steady as she introduced herself and explained the purpose of her message. She spoke about the surgery that had led to the discovery, about the shock of receiving the diagnosis, about the difficult process of telling her children. Her words were carefully chosen but heartfelt, balancing clinical facts with emotional truth. "This has been an incredibly tough couple of months for our entire family," Kate said, her voice carrying the weight of those difficult weeks. "But I've been amazed by all the support and love I've received from people all around the world. It really has made all the difference to William and me and has helped us both through some of the harder times." As she spoke about her treatment plan and her determination to recover, Kate felt something unexpected happening. With each word, she felt stronger. Speaking her truth, owning her experience, refusing to hide from what was happening to her. It was empowering in a way she hadn't anticipated. She talked about her hopes for the future, her gratitude for her medical team, her appreciation for the privacy her family had been given during the most difficult period. She asked for continued understanding as she focused on her recovery, but she also expressed her eagerness to return to her royal duties when she was able. "For everyone facing this disease, in whatever form, please do not lose faith or hope," Kate said, looking directly into the camera with fierce determination. "You are not alone." When she finished speaking, there was complete silence in the garden. The camera crew, the director, even the protection officers who had been standing at a discreet distance. Everyone seemed to understand that they had just witnessed something remarkable. Kate felt emotionally drained, but also strangely liberated. The secret that had been weighing her down for weeks was finally out in the world. She no longer had to pretend everything was normal or carry the burden of her diagnosis alone, and was the first to approach her when filming wrapped. Without saying a word, she pulled Kate into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "That was the most courageous thing I've ever seen." Kate felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief rather than sadness. She had done it. She had spoken her truth with dignity and grace, and now the world would know what she was facing. The video would be released the following evening, giving the Palace Communications team time to prepare for the media response and to ensure that Kate's close family and friends heard the news directly from Palace sources rather than through the media. But first, Kate had one more difficult conversation to have. That evening, she and William gathered their children again to let them know that soon everyone would know about Mummy's illness. "Tomorrow, we're going to tell everyone about the medicine I need to take," Kate explained to George, Charlotte, and Louis as they cuddled together on the sofa. "People might talk about it at school or ask you questions." George looked worried. "Will people be mean about it?" William shook his head firmly. "Most people care about Mummy very much, and they'll want to help however they can. But if anyone says anything unkind, you tell your teachers or your protection officers, and they'll handle it." Charlotte, ever practical, asked, "Can we still do normal things as a family?" Kate smiled, pulling her daughter closer. "We'll do as many normal things as we can. Some days I might be more tired, so we might need to change our plans sometimes. But we'll still have family dinners and bedtime stories and trips to the park when I'm feeling well." Louis, who had been quietly listening, suddenly looked up at Kate with his big eyes. "Mummy, will the medicine make you better?" Kate felt her heart clench at the innocence of the question. "The doctors think it will help me very much," she said carefully. "But even if I don't feel well sometimes, I will always, always love you, and I will always be your mummy." That night, after the children were in bed, Kate and William sat together in their sitting room, both of them processing the emotional weight of the day. Tomorrow, their private struggle would become public knowledge, subject to global scrutiny and discussion. "Are you ready for what happens next?" William asked, taking her hand in his. Kate considered the question seriously. "I don't think anyone can be truly ready for something like this, but I feel peaceful about it. I've told the truth, I've been honest about what we're facing, and now we can focus on the fight ahead without having to hide or pretend." William squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Kate nodded, feeling more grateful than ever for her husband's unwavering support. Together, she agreed. The next evening, as Kate's video message was released to the world, she chose not to watch the immediate media coverage. Instead, she spent the evening with her family, reading bedtime stories to Louis, helping Charlotte with a school project, and talking with George about his upcoming football match. But even as she focused on normal family activities, Kate could sense the seismic shift happening outside their home. Her phone was turned off, but she could see the increased activity of her protection officers, the additional security measures being put in place, the way her staff moved with the quiet efficiency that indicated a major media event was unfolding. Princess, and called just before Kate's bedtime. "I've been watching the coverage," and said. "The response has been overwhelmingly positive. People are praising your courage and honesty. Messages of support are pouring in from around the world." Kate felt a wave of relief. She had feared that her decision to be so open about her illness might be seen as seeking sympathy or attention. But Anne's report suggested that people understood and appreciated her honesty. "There's something else," and continued, her voice softer. "I've been crying on and off all evening. Not because I'm sad, but because I'm so proud of you. What you did today, the courage it took to speak so openly about something so personal, it's remarkable. You've shown the world what true grace under pressure looks like." Kate felt tears welling up in her own eyes. "I couldn't have done it without your support. Knowing you were there, knowing you believed in me, it made all the difference. You would have found a strength somewhere," and said firmly, "because that's who you are. But I'm honored that I could be part of helping you through it." As Kate prepared for bed that night, she reflected on how much her life had changed in the space of just a few weeks. From receiving a devastating diagnosis to finding the courage to share her story with the world, she had been on an emotional journey that had tested every aspect of her strength and character. But she had not traveled that journey alone. Anne's fierce support, William's unwavering love, her children's innocent courage, and the king's immediate concern had all combined to create a network of strength that Kate could draw upon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, beginning her treatment, managing her reduced royal duties, protecting her children from excessive media attention. But tonight, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced since her diagnosis: hope. She had spoken her truth with dignity and courage. She had the best medical care available and a treatment plan she trusted. Most importantly, she had the love and support of people who would stand by her no matter what happened. The road ahead would be difficult, but Kate Middleton was ready to walk it with her head held high, surrounded by people who love her not for what she could do for them, but simply for who she was. And that, she realized, was more than enough to fight for. 3 months had passed since Kate's public announcement, and the world had settled into a new rhythm around the knowledge of her illness. The initial flood of media coverage had eventually calmed to a respectful distance, though the public's concern and support remained constant. Letters poured in daily from around the globe, from children sending drawings, from cancer survivors sharing their stories, from strangers offering prayers and encouragement. Kate's treatment had been progressing well, though the journey had been more challenging than she had anticipated. The chemotherapy sessions left her exhausted for days afterward, and there were times when even the simplest tasks felt overwhelming. But she was responding positively to the treatment, and her medical team remained optimistic about her prognosis. Princess and had become an even more constant presence in Kate's life during these months. True to her word, she had redistributed many of Kate's royal duties among the family, taking on several high-profile patronages herself despite her already packed schedule. But more than that, she had become Kate's emotional anchor during the most difficult days. It was on a particularly challenging Tuesday in July that Anne's support proved most crucial. Kate had received her latest round of chemotherapy the day before, and the side effects had hit her harder than usual. She woke up feeling nauseated and dizzy, barely able to keep down the ginger tea that usually helped with the symptoms. William had an unavoidable engagement that day, a long-scheduled meeting with Commonwealth leaders that couldn't be postponed. He had offered to cancel, but Kate insisted he go. She knew how hard he was working to cover both his own duties and represent her at events she couldn't attend. She didn't want her illness to completely derail his responsibilities as well. But as the morning wore on, Kate felt worse rather than better. The nausea intensified, and she found herself unable to get out of bed without feeling faint. When she tried to call for help, she realized her phone was in another room, and the effort of walking there seemed insurmountable. It was Princess and who found her. She had developed a habit of dropping by unannounced during Kate's treatment weeks, always with some excuse, bringing flowers from her garden, delivering documents that could have been sent by email, checking on administrative details that could have waited. But Kate had come to understand that these visits were Anne's way of ensuring she was never alone during her most vulnerable moments, and led herself in using the key Kate had given her months earlier, calling out a greeting as she entered the apartment at Kensington Palace. When she received no response, she immediately went looking for Kate, finding her curled up in bed, pale and clearly unwell. "Oh, my dear," and said softly, immediately assessing the situation with the practical efficiency she was known for. "How long have you been feeling this poorly?" Kate tried to sit up, but immediately felt dizzy again. "Since I woke up," she managed to whisper. "It's worse than usual this time," and was already reaching for her phone to call Kate's medical team. But she also sat down on the edge of the bed and placed a cool hand on Kate's forehead. The simple gesture, so maternal, so caring, brought tears to Kate's eyes. "I feel useless," Kate said, her voice breaking. "I can't even take care of myself, let alone my children, or fulfill any of my responsibilities." Anne's expression grew fierce. "Stop that right now," she said firmly but gently. "You're fighting for your life. That is the most important job you could possibly have right now. Everything else, and I mean everything else, can wait." Kate's medical team arrived within 20 minutes, having been alerted by Anne's call. After examining Kate and adjusting her medication regimen, they assured both women that this level of side effects, while unpleasant, was not dangerous and should improve within a day or two. But as the medical team prepared to leave, Kate felt a wave of panic. The thought of being alone in her weakened state, even knowing that William would return that evening, felt overwhelming, and seemed to sense this immediately. "I'm staying," she announced, not asking for permission, but simply stating a fact. "At least until William gets back." Kate felt a rush of gratitude, so intense it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "You don't have to do that. I know you have obligations. My obligation right now is to you," and said firmly. "Everything else can be rearranged," and spent the rest of the day caring for Kate with a tenderness that surprised them both. She brought small sips of water at regular intervals, adjusted pillows when Kate needed to change position, and simply sat quietly nearby when conversation felt like too much effort. But it was during the afternoon, when Kate was feeling slightly better, and they were sitting together in the garden where she could get fresh air, that and shared something that changed everything between them. "I need to tell you something," and said, her voice unusually hesitant. "Something I've never told anyone except my closest family." Kate looked at her with surprise. "Princess, and wasn't someone given to personal revelations or emotional confessions? When I was younger," and continued, "much younger, in my early 20s, I had a pregnancy scare. Not just the worry about being unmarried, though that would have been scandalous enough, but the baby, there were complications. Serious ones." Kate felt her breath catch, and had never spoken about this period of her life in any detail. "I lost the baby," and said quietly. "But before that happened, for several weeks, I faced the possibility that I might die in childbirth. The doctors were very concerned about my health, and there were conversations about what would happen if the worst occurred." Kate reached out and took his hand, understanding now why this story was being shared. "I remember lying in bed during those weeks," and continued, "feeling completely helpless and terrified. I had always prided myself on being strong, on being able to handle anything. But suddenly I was facing something completely beyond my control, something that could take away my entire future," and paused, looking out at the garden where Kate's children often played. "The fear wasn't just about dying. It was about feeling useless, about being a burden, about disappointing everyone who depended on me. Does that sound familiar?" Kate nodded, tears streaming down her face. It sounded exactly like what she had been feeling for months. "What I learned during that time," and said, "is that sometimes being strong means accepting help. Sometimes being brave means admitting you're scared. And sometimes serving others means letting them serve you." Kate squeezed his hand tighter. "How did you get through it?" "The same way you're getting through this," and replied. "One day at a time, surrounded by people who love you, holding on to hope even when hope feels fragile." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both women processing the weight of what had been shared. Kate felt something shifting inside her, a release of the guilt she had been carrying about her inability to fulfill her usual role, a new understanding of strength that included vulnerability. "Thank you for telling me that," Kate said finally. "Thank you for giving me a reason to share it," and replied. "I've carried that story alone for 40 years. It feels good to finally tell someone who understands." When William returned that evening, he found Kate sitting up in bed, looking tired but more peaceful than she had in days, and was in the sitting room, having stayed to brief him on Kate's condition and the day's events. "How is she really?" William asked, and quietly. "She's struggling," and said honestly. "The physical side effects are difficult, but the emotional toll might be even harder. She feels guilty about not being able to fulfill her obligations, frustrated by her limitations, scared about the future." William nodded. He had seen all of this himself, but hadn't known how to address it without seeming to minimize Kate's very real concerns. "What she needs," and continued, "is permission to be vulnerable. She's been so strong for so long, for you, for the children, for the public, that she's forgotten it's okay to let other people take care of her sometimes." N's insight proved prophetic. Over the following weeks, Kate began to allow herself to accept help more readily. She let and handled several of her charitable commitments through video calls when Kate felt well enough to participate remotely. She let William take over more of the children's daily routines without feeling guilty about it. She let her friends visit and help with household tasks that usually gave her pleasure to do herself. Most importantly, she began to see her illness not as a failure of her body or a deviation from her responsibilities, but as a different kind of challenge that required a different kind of strength. The turning point came in early August, during what should have been one of Kate's routine follow-up appointments. Instead of the usual progress report, her oncologist delivered news that made Kate's heart soar. The treatment was working even better than they had hoped. The cancer was in remission. Kate asked the doctor to repeat the words 3 times, unable to believe what she was hearing. Remission didn't mean cured. There would be ongoing monitoring and maintenance treatment, but it meant that the active cancer was no longer detectable in her body. She called William first, then, and barely able to speak through her tears of joy and relief. Both of them dropped everything to come to the hospital immediately, and the 3 of them sat in the consultation room, crying and laughing and holding each other. "I can't believe it," Kate kept saying. "I can't believe it's real. It's real," and said firmly, as if her conviction could make it more true. "You did it. You fought, and you won." The news remained private for several days while Kate and her family processed what it meant for their future. Kate would continue with a modified treatment schedule for several more months, and she would need regular monitoring for years to come. But the immediate threat was over. She could begin to think about returning to public duties, about resuming her charitable work, about planning for the future with confidence rather than cautious hope. When they finally announced Kate's remission to the public, the response was overwhelming. Buckingham Palace received tens of thousands of messages of congratulation and relief. Church services around the Commonwealth included prayers of thanksgiving. The children's schools reported that classmates were celebrating with George, Charlotte, and Louis as if their own families had received good news. But for Kate, the most meaningful response came from Princess Anne. On the day of the public announcement, and arrived at Kensington Palace with a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple silver bracelet, engraved with a single word, courage. "I had this made weeks ago," and explained. "I always knew you would beat this, even when you didn't know it yourself." Kate put the bracelet on immediately and wore it every day afterward. Whenever she faced a difficult moment, a challenging royal engagement, a tense family situation, a moment of worry about her health, she would touch the bracelet and remember everything she had overcome. But more than the bracelet itself, Kate treasured what it represented. The unwavering faith that, and had shown in her from the very first day, she had whispered her secret in the garden at Windsor, and had never once doubted Kate's strength, even when Kate doubted it herself. Months later, when Kate had returned to most of her royal duties, and life had settled into a new normal, she and were walking through that same garden at Windsor. Kate was telling and about her plans to establish a new charity focused on supporting families dealing with cancer, when and suddenly stopped walking. "What is it?" Kate asked, concerned, and was looking at the oak tree where Kate had first shared her diagnosis, where Kate had later filmed her announcement video. "I was just thinking about that day when you told me," and said, "how scared you were, how uncertain everything felt." Kate followed Anne's gaze to the tree, remembering that moment with crystal clarity. "I felt like my world was ending," she said softly. "And now?" and asked. Kate considered the question seriously. Her world had ended in a way. The life she had been living, the assumptions she had made about her future, the sense of invincibility that comes with youth and health, all of that had been shattered by her diagnosis. But something new had been built from the pieces. A deeper appreciation for ordinary moments. A stronger sense of what really mattered. Relationships that had been tested and proven unbreakable. A courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Now I think that sometimes your world has to end for a better one to begin," Kate said finally, and smiled, one of her rare, genuine smiles that transformed her entire face. "That might be the wisest thing you've ever said." As they continued their walk through the garden, Kate reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The whispered confession that had started everything. The tears that Anne had shed when Kate thought the princess royal never cried. The courage they had both found in the face of uncertainty. Kate had survived cancer, but more than that, she had discovered parts of herself she never knew existed. She had learned to accept help without shame, to show vulnerability without weakness, to fight for her life with a ferocity that surprised everyone, including herself. And through it all, Princess Anne had been there, fierce and loyal, practical and protective, showing Kate that true strength sometimes looked like sitting quietly beside someone while they found their own way through the darkness. The cancer was in remission, but the lessons Kate had learned, the relationships she had deepened, and the person she had become through the experience would stay with her forever. She had whispered her secret to and in fear and desperation. Now, she could speak her truth with confidence and hope. The future stretched out ahead of them, uncertain as always, but no longer terrifying. Whatever challenges came next, Kate knew she would face them with the kind of courage that Princess Anne had helped her discover. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. And if she ever needed a reminder of how far she had come, she would only need to touch the silver bracelet on her wrist and remember the day when one whispered sentence had changed everything, and the woman who had listened with tears in her eyes and love in her heart.